Hello, listeners, and welcome again to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Today, I have a great guest, Adam Srotka, who's a machine learning and data science expert. He has his own company called Hypercube Consulting, and he's also very passionate about leadership in the tech fields and the hiring and recruiting process. So we're going to have a great chat about all things leadership and hopefully learn a bit about AI and machine learning as well. Looking forward to it.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Adam, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. No, good to be here.
And I'm going to hand over to you to start us off by giving us a bit of background about yourself, your career, your business, and why you do what you do, really.
Yeah, so I was a laser physicist at one point and got really into computational modelling of high peak power lasers, especially like the design and development of new laser systems. And towards the end of my doctorate, I toyed around with some optimization techniques that led me on the slippery slope to machine learning. Did some stuff where I was using reinforcement learning to build and design laser systems that was quite successful and quite interesting. And then I realized that I loved that actually. And I really like the idea of being able to apply my computational skills and my sort of ability in maths and engineering to like any domain and just to be able to play into other domains and solve problems all over the shop. So data science was a really interesting avenue to pursue that, and this was 2015, 2016. So right at the peak of the hype cycle, when everyone wanted to be a data scientist, that was me. And so in I went, and yeah, loved it. I worked for first job in data science was for a SaaS product looking to do stuff around online purchasing behavior. I've worked in insurance, in a pricing team, and then eventually I moved into a consultancy actually, and that's where my career really took a turn. I had kind of seen a few places and stories from friends and stuff that in small to medium companies they had the dream of data science and AI and all that, but couldn't really. They do like one project or two projects and then it would just run out and they wouldn't have much more to do. And so I genuinely thought back then that consultancy was a really good approach, and go in, do a targeted thing, kind of prove the value and help these companies start their journey. After a while of working at the consultancy, I got promoted to a senior leadership position. I was made director of the new business unit, the data and AI business unit, and that grew. That was really challenging and really hard to go through that transition from individual contributor and like kind of my own like problem solving day-to-day work to having to build and run teams and having to like win business, do performance management, HR stuff, like sales and marketing stuff. Wasn't great at it at first, but I got better as time went on. And then, yeah, since then I've worked for one other startup. Eventually I left that job after about 3 years. I worked for another startup for a couple of years as their head of machine learning engineering, because I really wanted to get into the green energy space, and the energy sector's like, for me, it was one of the reasons I got into lasers actually was all about the National Ignition Facility, which was in the news recently. That kind of has been a theme throughout my career. And so I wanted to get into energy. I worked for, a green energy SaaS platform thing as their head of machine learning. And that was really good fun, built some great stuff there and made a lot of good connections, learned a lot, and took the plunge back in September to kickstart my own consultancy now. So I'm Hypercube Consulting, are a data science and data platform consultancy services specializing in the energy sector because that's what we know best. But we've done bits of work for a few other sort of parts of the industry as well, which is, I think, always the beauty of that. Like at some level, the domain knowledge is always important, right? But at some level, you can apply the tools and the techniques to solve problems all over. So good way to be nosy into lots of other people's businesses.
Yes, indeed. So lasers to green energy. Very cool stuff.
Yeah, good fun.
For some of the listeners who maybe don't understand the terminology, what is machine learning?
Yeah, that's a great one because it's something that's really like it's banded around a lot and people don't understand. So you'll hear basically if it's the marketing team, they'll say AI, and if it's a practitioner, they'll say machine learning. It's a bit of a kind of joke you hear sometimes. But so artificial intelligence, right, is just the general broad catch-all term for computational stuff that appears intelligent or takes actions. But that can be as simple as rules-based systems, as long as it appears to take like decisions and stuff. It's a very broad term, AI. Machine learning specifically is basically looks to take statistical methods and approaches to develop predictive models using large sets of data, really. So in traditional statistics, you make a lot of assumptions about the shape of the data, right? And the data is typically normally like in a normal distribution and things like that. And then when all these assumptions are made, or you transform the data to match them, then you can use statistical methods to infer things from it, right? Machine learning kind of turns that on its head a little bit by just looking at absolutely loads of data. You can kind of find out these things without having to make some of the assumptions, right? So yeah, it's like doing statistics at scale using machines. And instead of like programming the model or saying, right, I want this thing to do this, you kind of let the data teach you what is under the hood. Ultimately, the best kind of short definition is just finding patterns in data that you can use and exploit to gain leverage or more advantage, or find things out about, maybe predict the future, maybe predict whether or not this is a video of a cat or a dog, so on and so forth, right?
Okay, so it's not self-aware and we don't have Terminators in the future.
No, I genuinely I always laugh at that kind of stuff because it's like AI and machine learning solutions are they're getting more and more powerful. They're really, really good, but they're usually really, really good at the specific thing they've been told to do. And it's why you hear about like Tesla, right? Massive organization, have spent unfathomable sums of money developing self-driving cars, right? Which is something that as a spotty 17-year-old boy, I managed to achieve after about 20 weeks worth of 1 hour lessons, right? So this is one of the biggest companies in the world, has spent unfathomable sums of money trying to teach cars to do it. And they still make these mistakes. They still autopilot crashes into sky blue trucks, all these like stories you hear about. Okay, these are like 1 in a billion events, and they are, for a lot of cases, better than humans, so on and so forth. But just shows that it's so difficult to build something that's what's called, and the idea of Terminators and the all-powerful is what gets called artificial general intelligence, right? So that is this idea that this super machine that can think on its own and develop its own solutions, right? We're far off from that. And will we ever get there? The stuff like ChatGPT's in the kind of peak of the hype cycle, in all the buzz at the moment because that was just released. That's incredible, right? But it's very Wizard of Oz. Like it doesn't understand what you're saying. It's giving you the illusion that it understands, and it's a very good illusion, right? And it is good at producing content. But I put a jokey post up about why COBOL was the best programming language for data scientists. Now, COBOL's been very, very much out of vogue for decades, and so on and so forth. And ChatGPT gave me a convincing argument, a convincing blog post that to a non-practitioner might seem reasonable. So this thing doesn't, I've just asked it to do something, it's done it. It doesn't have the awareness to say that this sounds like nonsense, I'm not going to go for it. So I wouldn't worry too soon about Terminators and the like, right? I think we're far away from that.
Good. I can still sleep at night then. One of the developers I used to work with, and I won't name him in case you think this is a rubbish way of explaining it, but I don't want to shame him. But the way he would explain it was he'd use the example of a candle in the night. So if there's like a candle, say, up to a mile away, the human eye and the human brain can look at that, see what it is, immediately recognise what it is, and know straight away, well, that's a candle, it's about a mile away. But a computer potentially could never do that unless you trained it with, a few million pictures of candles in the night.
Yeah, and so it's like there's all these ideas like machine learning ops, right, is this sort of younger field about, well, actually, how do you take machine learning models that work and make them work all the time at scale and continue to work indefinitely and things like that, right? Because you find a common thing about machine learning models is that they rot really quickly. So you get a model that works, and after a very short period of time, like it can become obsolete. And that's typically because things in the data change and the environment around it changes. So it was like trained on one view of the world and then it doesn't understand the new view. And the classic example is like, say you're training a model to just spot cars versus vans on a road, and that all the traffic you ever get is either a car or a van. So you train it and it's really successful, blah blah blah, and then because of some sort of local government change, that road now accepts bikes as well, right? Well, what does the model's never seen a bike, right? The model's understanding of the world is everything is either a car or a van. So this model, what do you do with it? How do you have to retrain it and start again, and that kind of thing. So in that example, right, if your model's never seen a candle, it's going to go, no, I'm pretty sure that's a light bulb because I was trained to look for light bulbs.
Yeah, or it will just think it's a dark night and won't even notice there's light there. Yeah, it's very interesting. We could talk about that for hours, but let's move on. Otherwise, we won't get all our questions done, will we? So, with your business is obviously quite new, but what part of it are you most proud of so far?
Yeah, so when I was working for Incremental years ago as their data and AI director, that was a big challenge, learning how to run. It was great fun. I was kind of told it was like being in a startup with stabilizers. So I was responsible for the budgets and everything, but there was a HR team and a finance team and so on and so forth behind me that was centralized to support me. So that was quite nice, but I got a lot of exposure to learning stuff. And one of the big challenges was actually how heavy-handed and difficult it was to break into new companies and to sell services, to sell data science services to people, because there's such a gap between what is actually required to do this stuff and the dream people get sold, or the understanding that the stuff's even possible, and so on and so forth. So that we spent so much time and effort doing that. That was really challenging. And then so since then, I put a lot of effort into my social media presence and just trying to share my ideas. I blog a lot, I write a newsletter, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. And then I started the Hypercube, and I'm actually proud of most, for that, is that the work is at the moment coming to me. I'm getting people come to me. And that's actually, I realized, because I've put all that hard work in passively, almost in the background and at scale. So that's quite nice. I've built a reputation, and now it's still very young, very early days, right? But now for me, it's do the absolute best work possible. I need to blow my customers away and build that reputation that this isn't just another consultancy. I want to be the trusted sort of niche partner for certain things, that I'm the first name that pops to head when you're thinking, I need to do data science in energy, or you should be speaking to Hypercube kind of thing. That's where I want to get to. So yeah, I'd say that's what I'm most proud of, is the fact that if you put in the work and show up, it can eventually pay off.
Yeah, well, that's what we all like to hope, isn't it? Yeah, but I'm pleased to hear it's working. That's great news. Yeah. And so, having spent all those years in operating and leading people in highly technical fields, very specialist areas, leadership in that kind of technical arena is something that a lot of managers struggle with, because either they're very technical themselves and they get lost in the detail, or they don't understand the tech and therefore struggle to kind of engage with their people. So what advice could you offer for effective leadership in a data and AI focused organization? I said AI, sorry, machine learning. I've learned.
No, AI, don't worry. Yeah, no, it's it's really hard, right? Because, and this is common, I think, across most tech roles, is that most techies don't want to go into management. We get into it because we love playing with the computer, right? And we love building stuff and we love doing things. So then you get to a certain level of seniority, and depending on where you are, what kind of organization you're in, sometimes you just then get given people to manage. And okay, you're now also a manager because we need to justify your salary and budgets, blah, 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 right? Other organizations have the engineering manager track, which I think is great for people that want to pursue that. But it's interesting. It's for me, I took the understanding that I'm very productive, very technical, I can build loads of stuff, that's great, but I'll have a bigger impact if I can get 3 or 4 clever people to work together and collaborate effectively and solve the right problems. And that, me and 2 other people will produce 10x what any one of us could do on their own, right? If we can work effectively. So that for me was the idea that actually by letting go a little bit of the fun stuff, right, and doing the bit that no one wants to do and trying to do it well, you can actually do a lot more and achieve a lot more, right? So with all that in mind, what advice would I give? I think, like, if you're just starting out, I would say expectation management is like, I always talk about communication being like the most important thing, and a subset of communication is expectation management. And I think, like, nail that and be like almost dumb about it, like black and white, almost contractual. Make sure everyone is on that page, like and that's not just the people you're managing, it's your customers as well, right? So if someone says, oh, we're going to do this and that, we need X, Y, and Z, make sure you have explicit, like, understandings on paper in a document that you can reference, that is agreed upon, to say this is actually what we meant by these things. We need these are the criteria, the thresholds. And then make sure that your expectations of the people that work for you or with you are very clear as well. Like, so many people, and techies do it to their managers and managers do it to their techies, like, get frustrated because they don't get a response to an email quickly enough, or they get spoken over in a meeting or things like that. I think you do need to say, well, have the conversation and say, my expectation is that when I'm speaking in a meeting, I'm allowed to finish before someone else interjects, right? And that can feel really confrontational and scary, which a lot of techies don't like. But just have it as an open thing, and you can do this anonymously. There's like workshops to do this with post-it notes and things, all in secret, so we can take away some of that. But that expectation setting, when I say I need this by the end of the week, I really mean it. There isn't really give when I talk, or no, I do expect you to be on the stand-up on time or on meetings on time, that kind of stuff, because it just smooths everything over. It builds trust and it just smooths things over. The next bit, then, I would say, as a flip side to that, probably more important, or as important, is just deeply, deeply listening to people. Like, really taking the time to not only hear what they've said and understand it, but try and figure out why they've said it and what headspace they were in when they said it and things like that. Because, again, that can build trust, and that is just like the lubricant that makes all this stuff much, much smoother.
Yeah, and they're interrelated, aren't they? Because if you want to understand the expectations of others, you have to listen to when they explain them.
Yeah. And when they don't, right? When they say something vague, you have to be able to say, well, actually, I didn't get that. I don't. Yeah. And if it might be because there's a technical jargon piece, or there's an implicit knowledge in the industry that you're not aware of, or in the culture. If you're a new manager, you might land at a company and realize that there's this huge cultural thing you're just not aware of yet. And so being explicit, that whole fake it till you make it thing, I don't think works as a manager. I think you almost have to do it the other way around, like pretend to be as dumb as possible, but ask all the questions, and everyone will thank you for it in the long run, because you'll all be on the same page and it'll be clear that fewer misunderstandings and so on and so forth. Nothing's more damaging than like misunderstandings and blame getting thrown about because nothing was really ever made concrete.
Yeah, it's about clarity, isn't it? And I think, it's fake it till you make it is really dangerous for a manager. I absolutely agree there. And I think a lot of managers fall into that trap because you don't want to be perceived as weak. And I think actually it's not. And well, first of all, being vulnerable is good because it builds trust. People will take you more at face value if you're open and say, look, I don't understand this. Can someone explain it? But B, if you try and fake it and you try and you just smile and nod, and people will assume that you do understand it, and then eventually you're going to get caught out and you've lost all of your credibility, all of your trust, probably most of your respect as well. And it's just not worth the risk, is it?
Yeah, and it's good because I think fake it till you make it is good advice normally for most things, but as a manager, I think it can be quite challenging and quite like I would almost go flip it on his head and do it the other way around. Yeah.
I don't know. Do you think it's good advice in a tech field, even if you're not a manager? Like, how far can you fake it with some of these?
It depends on it depends on the environment you're in. But like, if you're writing code, right, I would say it can be okay because as long as your process is set up where you've got the right reviews and checks in place, then yes, as an aspiring developer, as an early career developer, take on bigger stuff than you think you're ready for, because you should have the safety net of a more senior person to check your homework basically and go, oh no, that doesn't work, and here's all the reasons why, because that's an invaluable learning experience. Being super safe will slow your learning down, I think. But if you're in a place where you're the only person, then yeah, be caution. As always, it depends. The perfect consultant answer, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's something to be said for kind of learn by doing and experimentation and figuring stuff out on your own, isn't there? I think, rather than having the answer handed to you.
Yeah, but I learned most of the stuff I know really well is because I got super stuck.
Yeah, I mean, that sums up the entirety of my IT knowledge, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Got stuck, Google it.
Down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. Well, as an avid reader of your newsletter, I do know that one of the things you are particularly passionate about and you speak about quite a lot is the hiring process for these kinds of roles. And you do have some quite strong views about it. So can you tell us more about perhaps what experience has led you to form those views?
No, it's just rubbish, isn't it? It's just absolutely terrible, the hiring process for tech people. So I have interviewed probably north of 100, but easily north of 100 people in various tech roles, from software engineers to data engineers, data scientists, all sorts. I've also interviewed 4 tens of roles easily over my time at varying levels of seniority. And it's just a complete gamble. That's the thing. It's like, so you look at a lot of companies try and copy the FANG process, right? The kind of, let's do loads of stages, big tech, like questions, do some data structures and algorithm stuff and so on and so forth. And I think that you need to be careful with that, because unless you are a destination like environment, you will lose good candidates, right? Their budgets are so high and the salaries are so high and so forth. The stakes are so high at those companies that they're better off not hiring people than hiring the wrong people. So that's why it's so hard to get into these places, right? Ultimately, it's so difficult to understand whether or not someone can actually do the technical stuff that they said they can do. And are they going to be right on your team, and so on and so forth. So what led me to this is, it's just through experience and through seeing it, through making good hires and bad hires, through going through good processes and bad processes. And I don't know anyone that's satisfied with it. Like, I don't know anyone I've ever spoken to that thinks that they've nailed hiring and they know the best way to do it. And it's why I think, like, honestly, like the contract hire to perm conversion route that you see some contractors do is actually the best way to hire people, even though it is expensive, because contractors are expensive and you often can't convert them. But that's great, because then you're in this 6-month interview process. All the other one is like internships and things like that, right? Can this person do a placement or an internship or home grow them? But at a senior level, who knows? You've just got to go off of reputation, and can this person solve the problems I need them to solve? Will they fit into the company and the team they're going to be with? That's what you've got to answer. And yeah, good luck to you trying to find out how. I've got some stuff that works for me, but I'm still learning and I'm still tweaking my process.
Yeah, the reputation one can be quite dangerous at senior levels as well, though, because sometimes there's sort of the, I don't know what the word is, but it's the person that nobody wants to rubbish. They just want to say they're good to get rid of them.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he's brilliant. Yeah, worked with him for years. No problem. Yeah, hire him. Go, yeah, please. I mean, yeah.
I'm sure plenty of that goes on as well.
Yeah, and then at the other end of the spectrum, you see it on LinkedIn and places quite a lot, the sort of the posted entry level, in inverted commas, job descriptions where they're asking for like 5 years experience in specific programming languages and all these other things. One I saw a few weeks ago was it was the guy who'd invented that language.
No, it's Fast API. That's quite an old meme. So he posted that around all the time. He posted that a good few years ago, and it does the rounds all the time. But it's still really. He's a really good guy. I interviewed him once and for a podcast, and he's just absolute genius, but really, really good guy.
Yeah, I just loved it. It was I didn't know it'd been around that long, but if anyone hasn't seen it, they were saying about they wanted 5 years of experience, and so he posted and said, "Well, I only invented it last year, so..."
Because I've only got a year and a half experience since I invented it.
Yeah, it does make me chuckle. Anyway, so the hiring process then, how would you fix it? What are the most important questions to ask candidates and vice versa?
Well, actually, just tied to that Fast API example, just briefly, like, where does that come from? Ask yourself that. Like, why does that happen? Well, genuinely, I know for a fact that there are organizations, because I've worked with them or I've spoken to them and they've told me, that just copy other job adverts. So they just go and they look for the role they want to hire at a competitor in their space, and they copy and paste the advert, right? Which makes you think, well, where did those people get it from? Because maybe they copied it. And so where does that, and that is the kind of danger of letting, like, it's difficult when you're trying to hire a new set of skills that your company's never had, no one understands. Like, that is hard, right? But trying to emulate other companies is difficult because you don't know their specific context. You don't know why they're looking for those kinds of skills. So when it comes to actually hiring, I always say, start with, like, what are you trying to do? Like, what problems are you trying to solve? And then work backwards. Like, I typically think that in the first 9 months, right, you're probably hiring someone to do at least 9 months worth of work, right? So in that first 9 months, you've probably got quite a clear understanding of exactly what they'll be doing or what they'll be up to. So just hire for those skills, because if your process is any good, just hire for those things specifically. Who's going to be able to contribute to that, hit the ground running and all that stuff? Because if you're hiring good people and you've got a good learning culture and a good support culture within your organization, then after 9 months, they'll probably be able to transform into the other things that you need, so on and so forth. But hiring someone that's ready-made for everything they'll ever do, I think, is a waste of time, because at the same, like, a year in technology can be super quick. Like, the tools can change, and you might end up pivoting your business if it's small enough and stuff like that. When it gets to, like, the technical side of hiring, I always think that the more time you give the candidate, the better. You don't, like, and again, I know that Fang do the whiteboard coding and all this stuff that's well known, and people have mixed reviews of, but that's because they can and they need to filter out the thousands of people that apply, right? But for normal companies, like that aren't at the absolute sort of top of the Fortune 100 or whatever, look at, you want your candidates to have the best chance possible, because you like, I will do better in a talky interview than most people, because I love the sound of my own voice and I talk a lot and I do a lot of public speaking, right? You don't want to then hire me because of that, because I was better in that talky interview than someone that's an absolute wizard with all the tools but just can't communicate and struggles, right? If that person actually could be supported quite well in your organization, they're probably a better fit. So empower that individual versus someone like me, or like a complete blagger that actually hasn't got the tech skills but knows how to talk their way around a manager, which is the other danger. There was a good, I think he's taken it down, there was a good video on YouTube by a guy, Theo, who he's like a program management sort of YouTuber, but he talked about his hiring thing, and he has this sheet. I think he's taken it down, but it's really good. And he just says he gives candidates the option. You can do a project walkthrough of a project you've done, because ultimately, like, that's, you've had the most time to prep and show yourself off in your best. Or we can do a take-home exercise, or we can do pair programming, or give people those options. And I know that's difficult and it adds a lot of, like, complexity to the hiring process. And are you comparing like for like? But I strongly believe that you should offer several avenues to empower, the different types of individuals you're going to get that will apply for your roles, right?
Yeah, I really like that idea. And it's also a good way of sort of assessing whether the candidate understands their own strengths as well, because they're going to choose the one you'd hope that they think they'll be best at. And that's really important as well.
That's the thing. Like, if someone goes, I'm going to talk you through my project, you go, right, send me out up front and I'll make sure I can absolutely grill you on it, because there'll be things in it that don't work or whatever. Because ultimately, right, you want, imagine in the future, your candidate lands, you want them to be in the environment that suits them best every day to get the most value from them. So why are you interviewing them in an environment that is the absolute worst, where they haven't got a clue what they're going to be up to? They don't know the questions, they don't know the interviewer, they don't know the context. Like, surprise as an exam will never happen to them in their day-to-day job, hopefully. Like, that's probably the exception and not the rule. In a well-run organization, you'd expect them to have a lot of foresight of what's coming down the pipe and what they're going to be up to. They've got time to prepare, so give them that in the interview as well.
I think there's a lot to be said for that, not just in tech roles either. I think just interviewing generally is, in my view, one of the worst ways to find the best candidate, is to put them in a room in front of 4 people they've never met before and then grill them for an hour and watch them sweat. Like, you're not seeing them at their best. You're not seeing them at even in the environment they're going to be in day to day if you hire them. So yeah.
Yeah, and it favours overconfident people that
100%.
can talk and think off the cuff, right? As opposed to what you're actually hiring for, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Great. Well, we put the world to rights there. Good.
Yeah,
problem solved. Let's talk about leadership for a bit, shall we? So what's the biggest leadership and management lesson that you've learned in your career so far?
Oh, that's hard.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer that you need both leadership and management. There's a lot of you see the meme that goes around of like leader versus manager or boss versus leader kind of stuff. And I just think that's nonsense, because like you can have great leaders, and I've worked with great leaders that were terrible managers, and like, you know exactly what needs to get done and nothing gets done. Like I know exactly what we should be doing, and I'm on board, but we can't line anything up. We can't actually get things moving. At the same time, the best manager ever with no direction or no real like leadership that can't get people to follow, it's also going to struggle. I think you do need both, and I think they're separate skills. And they can be different people. They don't need to be the same person. Like, you can have a leader and a manager as long as they know the roles they're filling and things. Biggest lesson. Again, I think it's back to it all comes back to trust and expectation. My mentor once told me, and I quite like this, around, we were talking about the seniority levels of what distinguishes like a developer from a senior to a principal to a lead, right? What is the difference? Is it just more experience? Like, because years experience isn't a good proxy in a lot of cases, actually, for some of these. That's becoming more and more widely thought to be the truth. So what do these things mean? And he just said, look, it's just risk, right? The higher up the chain you are, the more ambiguity and risk I should be able to give you and trust you with, right? And so I think that's a nice way to look at it. And so that's why, like, an early career developer, a graduate or someone, you're going to give them real piecemeal, quite noddy, like really well scoped things to get into and tick away at, because they're learning the tools. They're learning so much that you don't want to also hand them a big open-ended project. And then someone that's been at it 40 years, you're going to give her like free reign to hopefully tell you the way it should be done. So you can be completely hands off and just trust that that's almost like a black box. I feed you rubbish requirements, you feed me perfect solutions, right? That's kind of what you want. And then I think it comes back to, if you can get that expectation and the kind of communication bit right, especially listening and building up trust, and there's another point here about that, then I think it goes a lot smoother. And so I made the mistake early on of thinking you needed to be everyone's friend, or you needed to treat people like your friend. And I did that. I treated everyone like they were friends first, colleagues second. And that really burnt me, actually. And I now strongly believe that you absolutely must treat people like colleagues first. You're there to do a job. You're there to achieve something collectively. It's great if you can be friends, and definitely try and pursue that if possible, but that is a secondary to your professional relationship. And one of the best ways to earn trust as a manager or a leader, I think, is to do the stuff that isn't related to your work, like listen. And so in my previous role, when I had quite a few reports, I forced like a 30-minute slot in the calendar, every single direct report I've got, one-to-one every week. And I say to them, look, you don't have to attend this, because weekly can be too much for some people, but it's always there. That is carved out of both our calendars so that you know it's always there. That's your time. And actually, there's no agenda. It's up to you what you use that on. And for some people, we just talk about stuff like Game of Thrones and World of Warcraft and all sorts, like, that isn't relevant. For some people, we talk about mental health struggles and like challenges around personal circumstances. For some people, we just talk about how they're going to career progress, or the work they're currently doing, or how to solve things, right? But that gives them the ability to kind of use you as a manager and manage up the way. And I do think being in the office makes a big difference. Like, Hypercube is remote first, but we will, when we grow big enough, we will get an office, because I think you win so much of that like interpersonal time through eavesdropping on, again, like who was listening to the same podcast as you yesterday, and they're talking about it over the other desk, or you find out that at lunch that someone's watched a Netflix thing and they hate it and you like it or whatever. And it's those little interactions that build up like a layer of this person's actually a human and not just like a work unit or a manager to me. Like when things get tough, you know that it's not just a top-down, this person hates me or thinks I'm rubbish. It's, this is a real person I know, and there's a challenge and we need to work together to kind of get through it. Long-winded answer, but yeah, kind of that's a bit of my management philosophy, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you say. I mean, manager and leader, definitely, you've got to have both. I mean, I'd go further and say it needs to be in the same person.
Yeah.
I see them as kind of interdependent. If you're going to be good at one, you've got to be good at the other as well.
I don't know many successful people that were just one, but
no,
I just think theoretically, I imagine it could work as long as they were very self-aware.
Yeah, I think, if you had a really good partnership or leadership team where you've got all of those skills within it, and that's the way most businesses do it, isn't it? Because it is quite rare to find both skills in one individual, although they can be taught, We're not talking about sort of God-given or genetic traits, are we? So, yeah, that's something a lot of businesses could work on perhaps and seek training, said the very biased leadership trainer. Yeah, remote, don't know. I think I agree that there's a lot to be said for the informed communications. I don't know if the considerable expense of an office is the best way to do it.
Look, I think it's a hard problem to solve, right? I don't know what the answer is. I hate having scripted Teams Zoom meetings as the only way of interacting with people. That is pants.
No, I agree with that.
Offices are too expensive. Community's too expensive. To get the best talent, you have to be remote, really. Like, I think otherwise you're very much limiting the pool of people that A, want to work with you, and B, can do the job that you need them to do. Don't know what the answer is. I know very successful remote only companies that have maybe cracked the culture thing. So I've not seen it. So maybe that's just a lack of my experience. Yeah,
I think culture is the operative word, isn't it? I think if you get the culture right, it almost doesn't matter what the working environment is. I mean, a few interesting ideas I've seen is people having like always on kind of Zoom or equivalent. So it's almost like a co-working space, but virtual, which is an interesting idea. I'd like to know how well it works, but.
So I've seen, I can't remember the name of it, but I've seen there was a tool that gives you like a 2D like 8-bit working space that like a computer game, and you have little avatars and you go around and you can do little office parties and stuff, and and it looked quite fun actually, but it was like a screenshot of it, that was all. But I've seen the water cooler hours and the lunch chats and stuff like that, but then like even those end up being a load of people just sat talking, which isn't how you collaborate in the office. Like if I'm doing boring stuff that's easy to do and I'm hearing you talk about my favourite sports team or whatever, I can just over my shoulder chip in and half listen and do that. But you don't have the ability to do that remotely, which is a shame because I don't know what else is.
Yeah, it's almost a mindset thing, isn't it? You kind of force yourself to do it until it becomes habit. But I'm sure you could.
Right, so the other one I will say, and this is like me giving away one of my slyest secrets for career progression, right? And I've done this, and it sounds really cheesy, but I think it worked. I got promoted to director after 9 months working there, so it did work. One thing, if you're early career, you want to climb the ranks, or you want to build relationships with people in your organization that intimidate you or like well outside of your circle of influence, right? If you're in the office, just go and get a coffee when they get a coffee every time they do it. Because most people get coffee or whatever the same time every day, or they get lunch at the same time every day. Genuinely, like, sort of creep out a little bit and figure out when they get and do things and try and line your schedule up. And I used to do that with like the executive team at one of the places I worked at. And I built great relationships with them because whenever they're waiting for the coffee machine to buzz through, so was I. Little bit of chat here and there, catch-ups. And that is something that you cannot do remotely.
No, it's true.
That works for me. Top tip.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear it worked for you, because I've seen people attempt that and it go quite badly wrong for them.
I can imagine it could do.
Because they figured out what was going on, and then it's just blatant. It's like, right, can you stop following me to the kitchen every time, please?
Yeah, maybe not every time, but
yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. Well, I'm glad to, yeah, as I say, glad to hear that's worked. What then, going in a slightly different direction, what would be the biggest mistake that you've ever seen a leader make?
oh, it must have been something I'd done.
It doesn't have to be something you've done.
But it almost certainly was. Yeah, I go back to expectation management, and I've talked about that a hell of a lot. But I was lucky to kind of get promoted to a senior position quite quickly. Didn't really know what I was doing, which is funny because I'd done the MBA and all that. So you think, oh, I know all this stuff, but actually, it doesn't teach you for the real world. So I got there through like being a bit of a workaholic, working all the time, having super high standards and all this stuff. So I liked the way I worked, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't do it. And then I just expected everyone else to just do that or just follow into that pattern. And then when they didn't, it just really hurt. And I never communicated that. I never told anyone that. I just assumed that they would know, either read my mind or just know through having seen me do it that it worked. So when things were good, it was fine. But when things were bad, it was terrible because there was nothing explicit. There was no, like, I'd done none of the work to set those boundaries and help people succeed in that environment. So I think, yeah, like setting your team up to succeed and stuff like that was the biggest mistake I made, was like just not really assessing the team I was going into. And so that was one thing that I actually turned that into advice I do actually normally give, is that kind of servant leader thing I think is really important. So I had a friend who doesn't work in tech, actually, asked me about how to run tech teams in his company. And he was like, what processes do you use? Like, what's agile, blah, 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 blah. And I said, look, just ask them. Don't go in top down and go, right, this is now the way we do things. Unless you're like very, very good at a certain process and like you have something that always works and it's the best. You're almost always better off asking the team, what do they like? Like, what do you want to do? Because if you can give them the autonomy within confines and say, right, well, I'm going to give you requirements and you're going to give me outputs, do what you like in the box in the middle, as long as you're ticking the boxes and hitting your numbers, then you've got freedom. That empowers them and enables them to do it. Going in and go, right, by the way, now we do Scrum and you've got all these meetings in and we're going to do it like this and you're going to run it, blah, 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 usually causes a bit of upset. Or you'll find that, like, maybe there's only one person in the team that likes that and everyone else would prefer doing it a slightly different way, and so on and so forth. So yeah, force feeding kind of ways of working and expecting people to just do stuff a certain way without really telling them or giving them room to move, I think was probably the biggest mistake I made.
I think I probably made a similar mistake myself, if I'm honest. It's very easy, isn't it, to be, especially when you're going from sort of practitioner to leader, and previously you've been sort of head down all the time, you know what works, you know how long it'll take, you know the best way to do it, and you just assume in your head that that's the way everyone does it. And it's quite easy to gloss over and not realise until too late that actually not everyone works the same way. Not every approach works the same way for every person, and you do have to have that flex. And you're exactly right, you've got to ask people what works best for you. A lot of particularly first-time managers could really benefit from asking that question early on.
And that's one small step away from, I'll just do it. I'll just do it then. And then you end up doing all the work, which isn't why you're a manager. Again, it's back to that leverage point. You're not leveraging the intelligence and the power of the team that you've got.
Yeah, exactly. It's micromanagement to the extreme, isn't it? And I've done that in the past as well. You know, you get to the point where there's a very specific process and you have to follow A to B to C to D, and you've got to fill in the form at the right stage or whatever. And someone else isn't getting it, and you're like, well, okay, it'll take me 2 minutes. I'll just do it. And then you end up just doing it forever.
Yeah.
All right. So more optimistic side of the question then, what's the best piece of leadership that you've seen?
One thing that I was really respectful of, actually, when the pandemic hit. Obviously everyone was really uncertain. There was like, people weren't sure what was going on and so on and so forth. And the exec team at Incremental took the decision to start running. They did like all hands meetings anyway, but they started doing a weekly all hands on a Friday. and they were just super transparent with like all of the key numbers in the business, like in a very public way. They were like, right. And they just said, right, we've made these decisions. And so they took the decision to basically have on hand in the bank X months of salary for the whole company, right? So they just said, we don't know what's going on, but we're going to do everything in our power to amass cash, because they were a cash positive business at the time, but they obviously reinvested it in things like that normally. So they just said, no, we're just going to save up, basically. So we've got this sum of money. And then they were very public about wins, losses, sales. Like they showed these charts. Each of the exec would present like their part of the business kind of thing and talk through things, and then have like an anonymous, open-ended question and answer session, which I kind of saw some of the stuff that came in from anonymous people, and it was brutal. People were not like, I like the company, but they got a lot of stick for some stuff. But I thought that was a really good piece of leadership, because it was very like, we're all uncertain here. We don't know what's going to happen. This is our best effort to give safety and security for the people that work here and work for us. And as we all know, that all turned out quite well. And it like eventually, actually, the transition to remote happened nice and quickly. It didn't really slow business down for some organizations, so it worked out fine. But I thought that was really good, just that open heart. And it was that, again, the CEO of that company, Neil, told me, there's like a position, there's a point in your career. We were talking about someone that I'd had trouble with as a manager, and I was struggling, and he got to a point where he said, there's a point in your career where you go from realizing that it's like, it's not you and the company, like you are the company, like you as an individual are the company, you literally are the constituent parts of it. So you need to, and that's harder, I think, for big companies, right? Like it's hard to feel like I am Ford Motors, or I am, do you know what I mean, like Lloyd's Bank, right? But it is still true. You're just a smaller part, right? But in a small company of like 100, 200 heads, like you literally are a significant impact on the culture and that place. And you shouldn't have that me versus the company mentality.
Yeah, it's a fine principle, isn't it? It doesn't always work in practice, but no, I think that was a very brave thing for them to do, though, and it obviously worked out in the end. I think the almost more important thing, though, is what they then do after that, how they address the feedback they get, and how they maintain that kind of openness and transparency over a longer period, which I guess worked out as well for them.
And again, they had a very successful exit last year. So
there you go then. Yeah, good lesson there then, definitely.
And they're super yachts or whatever.
Yeah, all right. If you had to pick your top 3 pieces of advice for a new business owner, what would they be?
For a new business owner, so again, that is me, and I might be doing a good job, I don't know. I would say don't underestimate the absolute sort of scale and power of social networks. Like, I genuinely, building a following on LinkedIn wasn't easy, but it wasn't hard. It just takes a lot of work, right? It's like a marathon, right? A marathon is a difficult thing to do, but there's nothing intrinsically complex about it. You just have to get good at running and run for a long time, right? So turn up, show up, grow your network, because what you get over a certain point of investment where people come to you, like I get approached to do podcasts, people want me to collaborate with them in their business, like I get customers literally email me, say, oh, can you bid on this thing for us, so on and so forth. Like, all my marketing's done for me. That, do not underestimate it, and don't underestimate a lot of businesses don't realize that, like, I've got customers in like India, I've got a customer in Brazil. Like, I've never been to India, I've never been to Brazil. Like, they've just met me through social media, right? But that's my business is able to deliver value to them. So don't underestimate that. I think really, really important, and you can keep going pretty cheaply and you can do it yourself. Second piece, the second thing that's really working for me, I say, is being super transparent with people. And I just I'm very open about sort of when I work with partners, saying, look, these are my ambitions for the year. This was in a book I read recently. I can't remember which one, but it says basically tell your partners your business plan and hear theirs, because like, they can't help you if they don't know what you're trying to achieve, right? If everyone just assumes you're just trying to make money, then you're in this cutthroat mercenary. That's like the default common denominator, right? Oh, we just want to make money. Well, that actually isn't the for Hypercube, that isn't the the objective. I need to make enough money so that I can keep going. But actually, my objectives are to build trust and reputation, to win case studies, and to grow my partner network, right? So I will do a lot, and I'm taking losses on some projects to do exactly that, because that is more important to me just now than just making as much cash as possible, because that's the stage I'm in. So be very transparent and ask your customers the same, because if they have a business plan, talking directly to that, you might find weird things like, if I told you that, your whole approach to serving my business might completely change. Then we'll just try and charge them money and make some cash off him. Third thing, I guess, that works for me is, just time management stuff. I think just be like really brutal with time management. I found out years ago, the thing that works for me is just blocking out big bodies of time in my calendar. Deep Work by Cal Newport's an excellent book. Just reserve whole chunks of your calendar for what works for you. Like, I get up early, and I don't typically eat till about sort of 2:00. So I am super tired and sleepy about 3:00. So I schedule in all my brainless kind of stuff for 3 till 4 normally, and then by 4 I'm fine again. So like, I don't like to have meetings early in the morning, because that's when I'm at my best and I'm in flow and stuff like that. So just, that's me, and it might work differently for you. So find out, like, as a human, as an animal, what's good for you as well, and try and be really cognizant of that when you're designing your week. Like, and I think it is again about designing your week. It was quite, again, my mentor used to have mise en place in his calendar every day at like 7:00 or something, and I love that. So if you're not familiar, mise en place is the idea in a kitchen that chefs cut and prepare all the stuff, like things chopped up and prepared, and put dishes in a place before they start cooking, so that when it's like, you ever watch most cookery shows, they're not chopping everything fresh, they're not grinding all the garlic and peeling garlic whilst they're talking to you. It's just there and ready. And that's true of like proper kitchens. And I love the idea. He did it mise en place, but for the business. So he would make sure he would look at his day, what he had to do, get all the right documents on his desktop, and so on and so forth. And it just meant things ran a bit smoother. And I love that. I don't do that, but I love the idea that if that works for you, try those kind of things. And just, because every second counts, right? I think, when it comes to running a new business.
I think so too. I think, if you're going to block out sections of time, another thing that's really important is scheduling in some downtime. Again, everyone's different. I mean, some people are just all on all the time, and fine. If that works for you, great, and well done. That doesn't work for me. I need at least an hour a day where I can just sit and do nothing, like watch some rubbish TV or Netflix or something, and just turn my brain off and recharge for a bit. But I'm like you though. My most productive hours are in the morning, early morning, sort of 7ish till 10:30 usually.
Yeah, exactly. If you can it's amazing how good you feel if you've done something massive before 9.
Oh, absolutely.
You just feel like a superpower person. Like definitely think that's work for me.
Yeah, if you can get 2 or 3 little things ticked off before you've had your breakfast, then that gives me energy for the rest of the day. Whereas if there's something that I've been sort of worrying for a week that I just can't quite get it finished, that's a real drain, I find. Yeah, it's funny, the little tricks though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just what works for you, isn't it, right?
Yeah, that's it. And it does take a bit of trial and error, I think, especially if it's the first time working for yourself and you're used to always having someone telling you what the priorities are and when to work on things. It is an adjustment, definitely.
Yeah.
Leadership Heroes.
So the home stretch then, the last question, this is the only question that I ask every guest without modification. So I call it Leadership Heroes. And the question is, if you had to pick a person, alive or dead, past, present, real or fictitious, if you want to go nuts with it, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership, who would that be and why?
Do you know what I think, actually? So I'm going to go off a bit off the rails here. And one thing that really inspired me to be, so I struggled, especially when I started as a leader manager, with being too emotional, being too passionate, too emotional, and getting a bit caught up and heated, right? And then, I don't know if you watched Ozark on Netflix, right? But
yeah,
you ever watch? I watch this through the lens of Marty Bird is a leadership genius, and you watch some of the situations he's in. There's people like shotguns in his face, like all sorts. He never breaks. It's like 2 or 3 scenes in the whole thing where he gets raised, or he reacts, and in every other situation, he's slow and he's collected and he gives a thoughtful answer. And he's like, great. And I looked at that, and I do sometimes say to myself, how would Marty Bird react in this kind of situation? Because he's such I know he's fictitious, right? But I just think that he was such a good, if I could lead like that under times of pressure, I'd be delighted. I mean, I'm not intending to like grow masses of heroin and things like that. That's not on the business plan, but, or get caught up in the Mexican drug cartels. But if I could just take his kind of resilience to stress, that'd be quite nice.
Yeah, it's an interesting pick. Yeah, it's been a while since I've had a fictitious character, so that's good. Yeah, well done. I don't know about Marty Bird though. I don't know. I watched it through a different lens, and I just assumed he's a sociopath. And the reason he doesn't react is because he doesn't have emotions.
Yes, maybe that.
But I think there's 2 lessons there, isn't there? There's one about, everyone's human and we all have emotions apart from sociopaths. And it can be quite harmful, I think, to try and bury those. But at the same time, as a leader, you don't necessarily want to just let them explode out and be on the surface all the time. You do need to maintain that calm when you're dealing with people. Yeah, it's a good pick. Good pick. I like it.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a different one as well, which is good, because I had a few now where there was a bit of repetition, so I'm pleased with that one. Thank you. Awesome. Well, the only thing left is if there's anyone listening who is interested in working with you or learning more about data science and what you do, how could they get in touch with you? And
I'm all over LinkedIn. I've got feel free to jump on and just connect with me on LinkedIn, and let's start talking. If you want to work with Hypercube specifically, that'd be great. Just adam.schrocker@hypercubeconsulting.co.uk, or the other one is the newsletter, which lives at newsletter.adamschrocker.co.uk. So that's like, if you want to hear some of my rambling in a longer format writing, then that comes out on a Tuesday, and that is pitched at like data and AI leadership management, because I don't think many people write about that specifically. And if you're like a leadership reading person, you'll realize a lot of the stuff in that is kind of generic leadership advice that I've tried to direct, because it's stuff that I've read and I've tried to direct to my context. But always looking for feedback on that if people like or hate it, because it's good fun to do. And I've met a lot of great people through doing all that writing stuff, right, basically.
Yeah, great. Well, I thoroughly recommend giving it a read, I must say. I've been enjoying it so far.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for your time, Adam. Much appreciated. And I'll put your link to your LinkedIn as well in the episode description so people can find it easily. And thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Most welcome. Thank you again, Adam, for taking the time. That was a great discussion. We touched on so many different topics there, and some really useful hints there, I think, for anyone in a tech field or looking to start their own tech business, or maybe hiring people as well. So hope everyone found that useful. If you did enjoy that episode, please do feel free to leave us a review on wherever it is that you're listening to us. That would be much appreciated. Hope you'll join us again next time, where we'll have another great guest. And in the meantime, remember, be a leader, not a boss.